Okay, in this chapter on digital sculpting, let's talk about how you can get from these aligned reference images to this 3D print of your first sculpture of a bust of an animal. And as you work through this next project, try to notice if you find this stuff fun or interesting, because if you do, then let's talk about how you can keep going until you're doing the full figure, human, animal, or otherwise. And if you find tiny little dogs to be cute, awesome, this will be fun. If you find pugs to be an abomination on the face of the earth, that can be useful energy too. Often our first sculptures are difficult and can look like abominations. And so bring a sense of humor to this work so that you stay loose and in a space of joy. To get started, download the Blender file that's got the reference images already set up for you. It's near this video. And then go ahead and add an icosphere for the mass of the head, and then add a cylinder mesh for the column of the neck, and then another icosphere for the mass of the torso. And as you scale each object to the appropriate size, make sure to follow up by hitting Command A to apply the scale so that we don't mess up all of our sculpture brushes. Then remesh each of your three objects. Remember, Option Q will quick switch from sculpt mode on one object to sculpt mode on another. Then turn on X-axis symmetry for all three of your objects, and begin smoothing away all of the triangles from your icospheres. I'm doing this with the draw brush selected, and I'm holding down Shift as I left click and drag to activate smooth mode. Now start working on the neck. Use the grab brush to position the neck so that it follows the contour of our character in right view. Then switch to the body and do the same thing. Follow the contour of the body and work just in right side view for a minute, just to say hi to this silhouette. Chasing a silhouette is easy. You're just lining up the edges. What's difficult is when you orbit away from side view and go, oh no, this does not look like a dog at all. You can hang out in front view and do a little bit more of lining up the edges, but at some point you've got to start orbiting the view and confronting the reality of your sculpture and feeling the feelings. And you're gonna feel feelings. I often experience them as intense judgmental feelings about my own insufficiency as a sculptor. Just feel them and then place them on a shelf in your mind and keep working and trust in the process of sculpting. Orbit the view a lot. Look at your sculpture so far and then look at the reference imagery and pick one thing that you want to make slightly better. Right now I want to make this mound of the nose slightly better. So hold down the D key and left click and drag on your reference imagery a shape that you can see, like this arc over the top of the mound of the nose, and how the arc on the side view reference imagery would go here. These floating grease pencil lines become useful simplification tools, reminders that that's all you're going to focus on right now. So switch to the draw brush and now hold down the Control key as you sculpt. Control inverts the brush. It lets you push into the material rather than mounding it outward. It's really useful for defining the boundary between the skull and the snout. And the goal here is not that it suddenly starts to look like a dog. The goal is that there is a more defined shape to the head. As you're able to, start playing with other shapes. Let go of Control key for normal draw, press Control key to push in, Shift key to smooth out areas that have just gotten too lumpy. Now look at how the snout wraps around the cheek of the dog. It sort of resembles the shape of an S. Let's put an S-like shape onto our sculpture as a reminder that something is happening there. And while I'm definitely feeling the feelings that this doesn't yet look like a dog, I'm putting those on a shelf and I'm continuing to work. And often this work means I'm trying to take a feature that's really clear and easy to see on the front, and I'm trying to wrap it around to the side, where it's also easier to see because I have pictures of the front and the side. It's that transition. How do they get from the front to the side? How do the lips wrap around the side of the head? That's often what we're up to when we're defining the major forms of the face. And I would encourage you to exaggerate these forms as you first put them in, because you can always hold down Shift and smooth them back down into something less exaggerated. Good. At this point, you should be somewhere in the middle. It doesn't yet look like a dog, but it also is definitely no longer an icosphere that's been smoothed. And as you go, it can be tempting to put the eyes in so that you can start to ask, will this look like a dog? So Let's respond to that temptation in a productive way. Press Control-Tab to switch back to object mode so that you can press Shift-A to add a new sphere, a mesh UV sphere. Why a UV sphere? Well, if you press RX to rotate about X so that the top of the sphere is now looking at you, you'll see that the vertices are aligned such that it sort of looks like an eyeball. Now that we've got one giant eye floating to the side, let's make two that are perfectly symmetrical. With your eye selected, click this little blue wrench, the Modifiers tab, and add a Generate Mirror modifier. And then click this Mirror Object Eyedropper and eyedrop the head of the dog so that the second eyeball is mirrored around the center line of the dog's head. Then position the eyes sort of where the center of the eyes belong and scale the eyes to be about the right size. For me, I noticed that my sculpture was blocking my view of the reference image, so I clicked this eyeball over here to hide the sculpture of my head so that I could see the photograph of the dog's eye to get a better size. When your eyes are positioned and scaled, click the eyeball again to turn the sculpture of your head back to visible. And you might want to flip that visibility flag one more time to use the side reference imagery to also position your eyeball here. Okay, does it look like a dog yet? No, it looks like a strange alien slug, and that's okay. By building the eyes in this way as separate objects, we can now go back to sculpt mode on the head and sculpt the form of the head to match the immovable eyes, and we're never going to mess up the eyes. And it's kind of what eyes are. They're basically spheres, and they don't change from being spherical. The face is what smushes around the eye to give the eyelids their shape and to give the character its expression. And by expression, watch how I can make this space slug start to express more sadness by using my draw brush to draw up the form of the upper lid and have it slope downward a little bit towards the outside of the eye. I'm still just using draw brush and the grab brush. The draw brush to make a new form, to build it up, and the grab brush to grab onto that form and wiggle it around a little bit into a new position. Next, I'm noticing that my character doesn't really have a skull, and so I'm using the draw brush to build up a little bit of the skull behind the eyes. And then, almost as important as the eyes is the mouth. I need to see it to start believing in this character, and so I'm going to draw the ridge of the upper lip. And now I'm starting to not quite have enough resolution, and so I'm going to hit the R key and size my remesh grid to be a little smaller and hit Command R to remesh so that I have a little bit more detail to start playing with these facial features. Okay, a tiny little indication that this creature has a nose, and I'm getting somewhere. I'm not to dog yet, I'm sort of to prehistoric dog turtle, but that's fine. I'm going to feel the feeling, put it on the shelf, and keep working. I'm going to hold down D to use the grease pencil to start thinking about the lower lid and the upper lid and how the two of them meet. And I'm going to notice just how quickly sadness in the expression becomes a bit more anger or focus in the expression whenever I mess with the eyelids. I'm going to mound up that mound of flesh beyond the nose, and I'm going to mound up the eyebrows, leaving that dip between the two eyebrows. Okay, now the ears. Go back to object mode and add another icosphere and put two giant, perfectly spherical ears. Use the mirror modifier just like you did for the eyeballs for these parts of the character. Notice how for the ears, I actually want to turn off x-axis symmetry because I have one ear and I'm using that mirror modifier to get the other. So I don't also want my one ear to be symmetrical. And then go to sculpt mode, remesh, and sculpt away. Start trying to make two floppy things. You can try to match the reference imagery exactly, or you can exaggerate it some, as I'm doing here. And check this out. It turns out that the ears have a lot to do with what makes a dog a dog. I've made a lot of progress from turtle to dog simply with the addition of the ears. And check out how the grab brush becomes an excellent tool for grabbing and tugging on the ears so they have the right kind of flop to them. Good, then start asking what's the worst thing about this sculpture and do something about it to make it a little bit better. There, the skull is a little less sunken in behind the eyes, and now the bony ridges are smoothed down to be a little bit more fur-like. Good, now let's join our body, neck, and head together to smooth out the seams. The selection order matters here. Go to object mode and select body, then neck, then head. Head should be the last selected because our eyes depend on the head for their mirroring, and our ears depend on the head for their mirroring. When you've got all three selected, Object Join or Command J. Then dive back into Sculpt mode, remesh, and you can smooth those seams away as though they never existed. Okay, now the mouth. There is a crease that turns down, but there's also one that swoops up like a smile. So let's draw that one on to start moving beyond turtle mouth. And then let's get that bottom lip in place. We're going to get a lot of mileage out of the existence of a bottom lip. Good, we've put a ton of work in, and we've likely screwed some things up while working. Look at how I've screwed up the silhouette from right view. It's now the beaked nose of a turtle, where it should be the swoop of this pug. This, again, is where the grab brush is so useful. I can take the details I've got, grab onto them, and pull them back into line to better match the profile of the actual animal. All right, we're getting into the fun zone where now we get to play. Here I want to focus on the eyelids because I'm finding that as I play with them, I modify the expression in a way that I find delightful. And I often feel that dogs are pleading for my attention, and I find that a couple wrinkles down here at the lower outside corner of the eye take me to a spot where I feel that sense of a pleading dog. I'm starting to get close for my liking. I'm going to play with the ears a little bit more. I'm aware that my sculpture is not a perfect replica, as though I had 3D scanned this animal. And I'm okay with that. I'm allowing it to be different. The last technical thing that I want to talk through is about cleaning up the transition and giving this sculpture a good base. Add a cube and position it like a knife that's going to slice off the back of the sculpture, giving us a clean, flat face. Select your sculpture, click the little blue wrench, the Modifiers tab, and then Add Modifier, Generate Boolean. We're going to use Difference mode so that we can subtract the difference of the cube from the sculpture, and we're going to target the cube as our tool. Then click this drop-down arrow, choose Apply, and then pull the cube away to see that it has been subtracted from the sculpture. Repeat that procedure to cut a nice clean flat on the bottom of the sculpture so that it can stand up on a tabletop. And if you want to get fancy, get 2 more cubes in there at an angle and slice off the sides to make a decorative shear on the side of our bust. And then breathe a sigh of relief. Congratulations. Last steps are to select the eyeballs and find that mirror modifier and apply the mirror modifier so that we get 2 real eyes. Then join them to the head. Same deal for the ears. And then remesh the whole head so that everything is one mesh. Then click Edit Preferences or Command Comma and go to your Get Extensions tab and type 3D Print and click Install on the 3D Print toolbox. That's going to give you a tab over here in your 3D view where you can choose the STL file format and click this Export button to dump a STL version of your sculpture out into the same folder where you've been saving your blend file. And those STLs are excellent for loading into the 3D printer and making your sculpture real. So go ahead and 3D print it and admire it, and then decide if you want to move on and make something more complicated, or if you want to just stay here and practice the skills on a different creature. Whatever you choose, just make sure that your subject is meaningful to you. Have fun sculpting.